time for the latest MCU film. Let's go! So Eternals is the latest film from the MCU in which we follow a group of demigods known as, well, the Eternals, who centuries ago came down to Earth to essentially help out humans, whether it was in civilization, culture, technology, or weapons advancement. And then after the events of Avengers Endgame, they find out that something big and of course bad is gonna happen very, very soon, so they all must come meet together. Alrighty guys, so let's get into Eternals.
Excellent!
This was an MCU film that it wasn't that I was not interested in this movie, because I definitely was. But every time I saw the trailer, I just went, huh, that looks cool. It looks interesting. I wasn't itching to see this movie like I was for Black Widow or Shang-Chi, where with Shang-Chi I was like, oh my god, I have to see this movie right now. With all of that being said though, every time I saw the trailer, I kept thinking to myself at the same time, this could be that MCU film where even though the trailer doesn't look particularly great, it could sneak up on all of us. And then to add even more on top of that, Chloe Zhao, who directed this film, also did Nomadland, which won Best Picture. Knowing how beautiful Nomadland is, seriously, if you guys haven't seen Nomadland, I highly recommend it. It's a terrific and actually a beautiful movie. I went into my screening, I sat down, I was very excited. There's quite a few things about this movie that I really dug, and there's quite a few things that I didn't like. Usually at this point, I would start talking about the performances because I thought most of the cast did kill it, but I'll get into that later. My biggest praise about Eternals was the fact that this felt like the least of all the MCU films, which I really liked about this movie. At the core, in its DNA, it is still an MCU film, but really when it came to Chloe Zhao's direction of this film, this definitely feels like the least MCU-like film, which I really appreciate, because now here's the thing. The MCU has gone down this format, a very specific format, ever since Iron Man came out, and I really do appreciate that Marvel and Kevin Feige allowed Chloe Zhao to do what the heck that she wanted to do. And what we got here, what Chloe Zhao does in this movie is that she gives us a very grounded MCU film. I mean, we've had plenty of MCU films that have been grounded, but I think that out of all of the how many MCU films is there? Like, what now, 26 I think? This to me felt like the most grounded in reality, despite the characters being demigods. I thought that Chloe Zhao did a great job of bringing this human perspective to these demigods. Something else I gotta appreciate as well. Eternals is definitely, and I'm gonna say this word, and I know a lot of people out there are gonna be like, oh, here we go again. This is definitely the most ambitious MCU film. I mean, Chloe Zhao definitely expands the scope. I mean, if you thought Avengers Endgame was big in scope, this film takes that scope and expands upon it so much more. And I thought what Chloe Zhao wanted to do with her vision and with the scope of the film was very admirable. I really do appreciate that. When it came down to the cast and the performances, I thought for the most part they were great. Gemma Chan was great, Richard Madden was great, Brian Tyree Henry, Kamal Nanjiani, Don Lee, Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek. Holy crap, I almost forgot Barry Keoghan. I loved Perry Keoghan. I am doing terrible with pronunciation. I have three standouts: Brian Tyree Henry, Kamal Nanjiani, and Barry Keoghan. Those three for me were the best characters in Eternals. Honestly, Barry Keoghan was so good in this movie. I feel like he wasn't in it nearly enough. Kamal Nanjiani, I thought he brought the MCU humor, I thought worked the best in this movie. Brian Tyree Henry, I thought was probably the most, besides Gemma Chan, the most relatable character in this movie. I mean, every time Brian Tyree Henry's in this movie, I couldn't get enough of him. You guys will have probably heard this a billion times by now by many reviewers, many critics out there, so I'm just echoing what they're saying. Visually, Eternals is the most stupendous looking MCU film to date. The way that Chloe Zhao and Ben Davis, who is the DP for this film, he's been a DP for many MCU films at this point. Just the way that Chloe Zhao and Ben Davis lens and frame every spot of this movie, again, not did it feel very grounded, but the way that Chloe Zhao uses color in this film looked absolutely amazing. See this movie on an IMAX screen. I mean, in an IMAX screen, the visuals looked absolutely incredible. I mean, the CG, there's definitely some spots with the CG I was just like, whoa, that looked good. The action sequences in Eternals were, oh my god. Chloe Zhao was mentioning way before this movie came out that she was inspired by a particular film when it came to this movie's action sequences. And one action sequence in this film definitely showed that inspiration. And I thought that Chloe Zhao pulled off the action very well. It's easy to follow. It's widely shot with beautiful wide-angle lenses. The final battle as well was very, very exciting. Every time this movie focuses on them as a family, the conflicts they have, the turmoil they have, of them trying to figure out what they're gonna do to try and help humans advance and see if they're gonna interfere with humans in any single way. Anytime that those parts happen on screen, that was my eyes were glued and locked on the screen. The music of Eternals was also great. Ramin Djawadi, I am pretty sure every time I've mentioned his name, I have butchered it to high else. It's very epic. It's a big score. The musical score in this movie was terrific.
Well, that's just fucking great!
There's quite a few things that I liked about Eternals. At the same time though, there's quite a few things that I didn't like about Eternals. And I mean quite a few things that I didn't like about Eternals. One of my biggest issues with the Eternals is this, and that's how they handle the story. Eternals is a film that tells a story that spans across 7,000 years. 7,000 years. They're packing in 7,000 years of story and lore into a 2.5-hour movie. That is a shitload worth of story there, and in my eyes, in some ways it worked, but honest to God, guys, and this really hurts. In a lot of ways, I really do feel like that this was one of the biggest detriments to the film, because here's the thing, Eternals has this big problem with not only getting so much lore across, I mean, I love lore. I love a lot of lore. When it focuses on the Eternals being a family and dealing with the conflicts, whether they wanted to interfere with what the humans were doing throughout history, that's the stuff that I absolutely loved about this film. In between that though, this movie is a heavy, and when I mean heavy, I mean heavy. Eternals is a heavy exposition dump. For me personally, the exposition worked in some aspects, and there were some aspects where I was just like, alright guys, let's get on with this. That brings me on to the next thing. The pacing of this movie. The pacing of Eternals. This movie slows, and I mean it slows. Again though, going back to the storytelling and the lore, this movie packs in so much dense material that you are just being dumped with exposition almost the entire runtime. And it got to the point for me where, I mean, I hate to say this, and it kind of blows my mind that I'm about to say this, but a lot of the time Eternals bored me. A lot of the time I was struggling to stay awake. I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's generally how I felt watching this movie. Eternal's story is told in a very non-linear fashion. Non-linear storytelling is a great way to get certain things across. Because of the non-linear storytelling, I found it very difficult to not only care about the central conflict of this movie, but to find any emotional attachment to a couple of the characters, particularly Sprite, because of Salma Hayek, Angelina Jolie's character. I think that Disney Plus would have been the best option for this story. I really do think that this story on Disney Plus would have probably had the best benefit possible, because again, when you're packing in so much material and you're just unloading it out there, I feel like that's going to be polarizing. Some are either going to really like it, or some are going to be like me, and it just went to the film's detriment on my end. When it came down to the actual conflict, the main conflict of Eternals, I didn't find myself caring so much about the main conflict of this movie due to the amount that they jumped around during either a certain time period or go to a certain member of the Eternals team. Since I really didn't feel any emotional attachment, a lot of the time, I was not only uninterested, but I was bored. When it came down to the cast and the characters, for the most part they killed it. However, there are two characters that either one I didn't really care about, or the other one I was just like, where's more of her? Salma Hayek is such a great actress and she is great in this movie, but she's not in it really that much. The one character I couldn't feel any attachment to was Sprite. I didn't care for her whatsoever. I mean, I thought the actress did a great job playing her, but her characterization was just so paper thin that if she died, I could have cared less. If anything happened to her, I wouldn't have cared whatsoever. Almost forgot about another thing. The film's villain. I just felt like that they were there. I felt like the villain was just there to cause disturbance, go away, then come back, go away, come back, go away. I didn't care about the villain at all. He was just there. What I'm about to talk about here is really so much of a criticism, but more of a huh? One post-credit scene in this movie introduces something, it brings in something, and the moment that I heard this thing, this popped in my head.
Who?
I actually turned to my boss and I was like to him, who the fuck is that? I mean...
And here we go.
So overall, I gotta be honest with you all. Eternals underwhelmed me. Not only was this film underwhelming, but Eternals was a mixed bag that I unfortunately disliked rather than liked. Visually, the movie looked absolutely amazing, and most of the cast I thought killed it, and the action was great. Unfortunately though, the way they handled the story, it was all over the place, and while I really admire the ambition and the scope of this movie, I personally feel that they bit off way more than they could chew here. All in all, I'm gonna give Eternals a 2.5 out of 5. I really want to like this movie, guys, and for those of you who love this movie, I am so happy for you guys. I just wish I was in that same boat, but personally for me, I just wasn't a fan of Eternals. So comment down below and let me know, out of all of the MCU films, which one is your most disappointing of the MCU? Let me know below. If you guys want to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. I'm also on Snapchat, so if y'all want to follow me on all those social media platforms, all the links in the usernames in the description below. I hope you all enjoyed my review of Eternals. If so, please hit that like button, also subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for the latest video of mine goes live. If you guys want to see any of my previous 2 reviews, please click on the right there or right there. And of course, until my next review or video, I will see you all next time.